for joining us today for this event. We're delighted to have you here. My name is Juliane Doscher, and I'm Program Manager at the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Foundation. For those of you who might not know, the Mansfield Foundation is a nonprofit organization that promotes understanding and cooperation in U.S.-Asia relations. Maureen and Mike Mansfield's values, ideals, and vision for U.S.-Asia relations continue through the Foundation's exchanges, policy dialogues, research, and education, which create networks among U.S. and Asian leaders, explore the underlying issues influencing public policies, and increase awareness about the nations and peoples of Asia. This public event, Building Human Capital Through the U.S. Japan Alliance, is a culmination of 5 virtual discussions from the Foundation's working group of the same name, consisting of practitioners and scholars, 9 of whom are with us today. This working group was convened to address growing concerns surrounding the severe lack of human capital in the field of cybersecurity, with a particular focus on the U.S.-Japan Alliance, and grew out of a significant need to focus on cybersecurity capabilities between these allied nations. The project and event itself is made possible by generous support from the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo, which recognizes that building the human capital needed to protect, deter, and counter emerging cyber threats is critical to the national security of both nations and to the U.S.-Japan Alliance's ability to foster peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. As the Foundation's namesake, Senator Mike Mansfield, used to say, the U.S.-Japan relationship is the most important bilateral relationship, bar none. As partners and global leading powers, it is essential that the United States and Japan work together to shore up cyber defenses. The discussions the working group had served to further highlight the benefits of utilizing the unique strengths of the U.S.-Japan Alliance as a platform for building human capital in cybersecurity. We are grateful that the U.S. Embassy agreed with this assessment, and this project wouldn't have been possible without the Embassy's generous support. It is our honor to work on such an issue of great need, and I'm delighted to invite our sponsoring partner to provide a few words of welcome. Now, it is my pleasure to hand the mic over to Ms. Abigail Bard from the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo.
Thank you, Juliane. Good afternoon. My name is Abigail Bard. I'm an economic officer at U.S. Embassy Tokyo. I'd like to thank our panelists, our audience members, the University of Tokyo, and particularly the Mike and Maureen Mansfield Foundation and its wonderful staff. The Mansfield Foundation is a strong partner of the U.S. Embassy and the U.S. Japan Alliance. We're very excited to sponsor this event today. As our world becomes more digitized, protecting digital infrastructure and assets becomes even more important. This is doubly true as malign actors seek to exploit vulnerabilities in cyberspace and do harm to our countries, our people, and our shared alliance. Cyber attacks can paralyze our critical infrastructure, steal our secrets, and undermine our security and prosperity. As our adversaries become more sophisticated, we must make sure we are keeping ahead of the threats. If you look at statements coming from both our Japanese and U.S. leaders, in bilateral and multilateral forums, you'll see the priority that we place on enhancing cybersecurity. We work together as an alliance and with these other partners to improve the safety of cyberspace. In fact, the Quad announced the Quad Cybersecurity Partnership at the May Leaders Summit this year. We hold regular U.S.-Japan cyber dialogues to enhance cooperation on this issue. And in October, the United States and Japan partnered with the European Union to host the Industrial Control System Cybersecurity Week. Through this event, we provided hands-on training to 37 participants from across the Indo-Pacific and held a seminar attended by over 130 people on cybersecurity. Protecting cybersecurity requires that we have a strong cadre of cyber professionals. We must accelerate our action to develop cyber talent so that our cyber workforce can tackle both the challenges of today and the challenges of the future. It is also critical that our cyber workforces represent the diversity of our countries. With that, it's only natural that we would want to promote the development of the cyber workforce through our alliance. I look forward to hearing and learning from our esteemed panelists today, and thank you for sharing your time and expertise with us, and thank you for the Mansfield Foundation for putting on this important program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abigail. Before we jump into our 2 panels, I would like to remind everyone that this event is public and on the record. After the panels are concluded, we will turn to the audience for Q&A, so we appreciate your patience before then, and we will have open Q&A. In the interest of time, I will only provide a brief introduction of our speakers for each panel. You may find further details about them on the event page on our website, mansfieldfdn.org. Panel 1 will focus on the question of why U.S. Japan cooperation in cybersecurity matters. The panel will be moderated by Ms. Rika Nakazawa of NTT, alongside panelists Dr. Benjamin Bartlett from Miami University in Ohio, Ms. Tamara Klajn from U.S America, Mr. Kazuo Noguchi from Hitachi America, and General Tatsuhiro Tanaka from Fujitsu. Panel 2 will outline our policy recommendations and will be moderated by Mr. Joseph Kelly of the University of Maryland, alongside panelists Mr. Toshio Nawa of Cyber Defense Institute, Ms. Simone Petrella of Cyber Vista, and Mr. Robert Sheldon of CrowdStrike. Rika, it is now my pleasure to hand the stage to you and your colleagues for our first panel.
Thank you very much. Yes, the mic works. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here today with you on a very, very important topic. I thought I'd start just to break the ice with everybody here on a couple of quotes that I came across recently. One is quite fun, and the other one is quite serious, because bilateral relations should always have balance. So the one that's fun is passwords are like underwear. Don't let people see it, change it very often, and you shouldn't share it with strangers. Now the second one that's on a more serious note is no technology that's connected to the internet is unhackable. And so I know that all of us have experienced the great digitalization that's happened with COVID-19. And so today, I'm with my esteemed panelists to talk about why U.S. Japan cooperation in cybersecurity matters. And I will take the liberty and the honor of introducing each of our panelists so that you can have some context on the perch from which they speak. I should say perch and from on the ground as well. So I have on the very end there, Mr. Tatsuhiro Tanaka, who is a retired Major General with the JGSDF and current research principal at Fujitsu Systems Integrated Laboratories. He is a graduate of the Japan National Defense Academy and was commissioned in 1975. He received several education courses, including U.S. Marine Corps Command and Staff College in 1990 to 91 during the Gulf War, Joint War College of Japan Self-Defense Force in 1994, and studied at Henry L. Stimson Center as a fellow researcher in 2001, soon after 9/11, and at Harvard University Asia Center as a senior fellow during 2012 through 2014 to study the international relations for Japan and the cyber deterrence in cyber warfare. He served as a staff for international related matters like PKO and military exchange programs, including the arms control and the confidence building among countries. He served for many U.S.-Japan bilateral matters, including as a planning J3 staff for the first joint bilateral command post exercise in 1989, and as a J5 staff and the co-chair of a bilateral action staff level conference for the guidelines of U.S.-Japan defense cooperation 96 through 97. Welcome, General Tanaka-san. And next to Tanaka-san, we have Kazuo Noguchi. He is a senior manager of security in Hitachi America R&D and a senior researcher at Keio Research Institute. I hope nobody takes offense to that. I realize we're at Tokyo Daigaku, Keio University. I went to Princeton, and we have our friendly rivalry with Harvard and others, so I know the feeling. And executive director of INCS Center of Excellence. He has facilitated workshops, panel discussions, as well as been various speakers and panelists in government, industry, academia collaborations, including INCS Center of Excellence, KOCCRC, Columbia SIPA, Cyber Dialogues, Multilateral Cybersecurity Action Committee, and United Nations Open-Ended Working Group. 2016, he spearheaded the initiative of the INCSCOE, organizing an international alliance with the US and British governments, companies and universities, conducting KO International Cybersecurity Symposium, International Digital Trust Sandpit Competition, Country to Country Capture the Flag, and mutual recognition of trust services in the US, Japan, and EU. Welcome, Noguchi-san. And then I have Dr. Benjamin Bartlett.
Worked hard for that.
I know. My goodness. Doctor is an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at Miami University in not Florida, but Ohio. He received his PhD in political science from the University of California at Berkeley, go Bears, and an MSc in computer science from the University of Toronto. His research interests include comparative cybersecurity policy, cybersecurity in East Asia, and international cooperation on cybersecurity capacity building. And last, but certainly not least, we're also joined by Ms. Tamara Klajn, who is currently at Princeton University, go Tigers, where she researches great power politics and US foreign policy. She previously held a number of roles with the US government, including at the Department of Defense, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and the Department of State, where she served as the Chief of Staff for Secretary John Kerry's policy planning staff. Prior to her time with the US government, she worked for non-governmental and intergovernmental organizations in sub-Saharan Africa. We have quite an esteemed panel here today, and we will have Q&A at the end after the second panel, and I invite you to please ask questions and take advantage of this brain trust that we have. So, to casually kick things off on this very important topic, I'd love for all of you to just give a few remarks on the key areas of cybersecurity you've been engaged in. I touched on them in introducing you, but would really love for you to highlight the things that you think are the most salient in light of the issues and the challenges we face today. So, Major Tanaka, if I can ask you to start.
Thank you very much. Very kind introduction for me. And I had many chance to go to United States and other overseas countries. I'm not a good English speaker though, because I'm a military person, short-minded. Oh, no, okay. So my specialization in cyber warfare and cyber deterrence. So this includes the areas such as denial deterrence, also the retaliatory deterrence or punishment, confidence building measures, capacity building, and the cyber intelligence for attribution. So maybe that I was involved in this project. I'm studying for this cyber deterrence or cyber warfare from the military side. So I have enjoyed this project. Then it is my pleasure to be here and participate in this project. So the theme of this session is why U.S. Japan cooperation in the field of cybersecurity is so important. So I will talk a little bit about it based on my experience shortly. I know that it is important as the U.S.-Japan alliance. The role of the alliance historically, besides being a comprehensive character of our alliance, militarily it has been an alliance in the field of war and conflict in the physical domain. So I served in J3, as Rika-san introduced me, that first I served in J3 in the Joint Staff Office in 1990. And I was in charge of the design and execution of the joint bilateral U.S.-Japan command post exercise. It was the first exercise to integrate all types of exercise for the Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Marine Corps. The world at that time was a strategic environment with almost no gray zone, focusing almost exclusively on the physical domain. But now, with the evolution of the internet and the cyber warfare, as well as the evolution of the hybrid warfare, we are faced with a need to enhance the role of alliance at the layer 3 level. So, I mean in cyberspace. Physical domain is physical battlefield is very close, very narrow. But the battle space in the at the layer 3 level is a global. So our role of the alliance should be changed in some ways. Is my point. So the challenges are many we have. We must do many challenges rapidly. I believe that we must start with sharing the spirit and the values of cyber warriors. So cyber warriors are maybe that they grow in that self-defense force, and we have to share or have the same value and the spirit to fight along in the layer 3 level. So then consider such issues as the technology and the information sharing and the cooperation, what alliance should do for cyber deterrence, and how the roles and the missions of cyberspace between Japan and the United States should be. I look forward to contributing in this area. In addition, this project will play a significant role, and I'm honored to be able to participate in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Part of being able to outsmart hackers is to not go as you would predict. So I'm not going to go to you, Noguchi-san. There you go. I'm actually going to ask Tamara to come in. I'll give you my.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and it is an honor to be both with this panel today and in this room with all of you, so thank you. So I am, as you might have been able to tell based on my bio, I'm kind of the broad policy person in the group. And cybersecurity, despite the fact that, you know, I cover and I think about broad questions of international relations, about relationships between powers, among powers, both bilateral and multilateral, what's so critical about cybersecurity and the way that it's popped up in each step of my career and in each different role is that it is part and parcel of every one of those relationships. It is both an issue on which nations, especially allied nations and friendly nations, cooperate, and it is also an issue that underpins the ability of them to do the kind of work that they're committed to do for their citizens, for the international community at large. So the reason that I'm here with this group today, and why I feel so honored to be able to speak with all of you about this, is that without strong cybersecurity measures, the abilities of nations to work together to achieve shared goals and mutually identified goals of their relationship, it's severely limited without that one pillar in place.
Thank you very much. Noguchi-san, yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
I'm honored to be here. In my recent role is, as already Rika-san mentioned, the international side of the government, industry, academia collaboration, particularly these days, U.S. Japan. My really concern, living in the States a long time now, that sea changes. There are a lot of different assumptions are coming up, and concerning how Japan can survive in this condition, and from the private sector as well, as General Tanaka mentioned, that the warfare is coming to the critical infrastructure, private sector, particularly international companies for the cyber attacks for the global supply chain. If there are any part is not strong enough, whole supply chain impacted. And that can cause a lot of other implications, sometimes for energy, for instance, as the implication for their life, for everybody. Anywhere in the world it happens. So recent focus is coming from resilient and how to prevent, or if anything attack happened, how to recover well. And
there are any alternatives of business continuity planning, and it's not the same 20 years ago, and coming to the vulnerability to the weakest point for the critical infrastructure, how we can coordinate with government, industry, and getting towards innovation for the future, not to happen kind of vulnerable areas. That's really the concern. The U.S. Japan, particularly personally, I feel complementary. There are a lot of good to mutually strengthen that can lead for the other countries or companies. So let me stop here, but I have a lot of concern, but if I can contribute anything, I'm really happy.
Thank you. And Dr. Bartlett.
I thought maybe you were going to throw a real curveball and just skip me entirely. Obviously, as a professor, my main role is as an educator. I teach in the political science department, so I'm mainly not teaching people who have a tech background. I'm teaching people interested in politics. And while a couple of them do go into cybersecurity, many of them go on to, law school or business or become congressional staffers. So I'm hoping that what I am doing, let's hope, is building a better understanding of cybersecurity among sort of a broader population of people, right, who will end up, working in business and government, not in technical roles, but who can therefore interface with people working in technical roles and can understand the problem. And hopefully that is my contribution. Along with that, of course, along with educating, I research, particularly looking at how different countries, especially Japan, deal with the cybersecurity problem, how they have adapted certain policies and why. And again, though, the goal there really is to build understanding, right? I'm hoping that in doing this, right, we can better learn from each other sort of what our good approach is towards cybersecurity, why are we taking these different approaches, and how can we better, work together and cooperate on these issues.
Yeah, thank you very much. So for those of us who are here, the idea of U.S. and Japan working together is probably a given. It's atarimai in many ways. But I think it would be very good for us to consider some of the historical context and the evolution of U.S.-Japan relations in this bigger context of this modern era where digitalization has become par for the course. So I would love to ask a couple of our panelists who have the background and history on the evolution of U.S.-Japan relations, specifically on the fulcrum of digital collaboration in cybersecurity. So Tamara, if I can start with you.
Sure. I'll start kind of with the big picture of our relationship and then turn to Dr. Bartlett. Fill us in, especially on these more detailed aspects. So as many know in this room, U.S. and Japan have been treaty allies since 1951, right? And this is a critical fact, and really has shaped so much of our partnership and our relationship since that time. Obviously, there have been changes through history on the issues that we partner around, the ways that we partner, but the friendship and the alliance has been steadfast. And so it's important to think about kind of a couple of the key areas where we've worked together and then how cybersecurity fits into all of this. So first and foremost, economically, we are inextricably linked, right? As our colleague from the embassy, I'm sure can attest. So here you have, the world's first and third largest economies, and in 2019, this accounted for 30% of the world's gross domestic product. We're also key trade and investment partners, but this isn't the only area of cooperation, right? We've had a number of shared goals that have underpinned our bilateral relationship. So first, for one, regional security concerns have been a big one, including countering threats from North Korea, to include threats in the cyber domain in particular. But it hasn't just been a military partnership either, right? Cooperation has existed on science and technology, on global health, on energy, nuclear non-proliferation, climate change, pandemics, agriculture, it goes on and on and on. And the reason I mention these is that more broadly, the U.S. and Japan have worked together to bolster a rules and norms-based international order, and that's especially important in this domain. So just this past May, when there was the meeting between Prime Minister Kishida and President Biden, they reaffirmed this commitment to this rules-based international order and our joint leadership of the system. But as part of this meeting, they also specifically decided to accelerate cooperation in the cyber and space domains and highlighted the ways that cybersecurity and information security form the foundation of close alliance cooperation and will remain a continuous focus of our collaboration. And so this is where cybersecurity fits in, right? Strategies to address the problem are strongest when they're considered as part of a broader geopolitical context. And much like cyber, is both a domestic and a foreign policy issue. The issue of cybersecurity both underpins each one of the shared goals that I've mentioned and also serves as its own line of action for our relationship. And I will now turn to
Great. So, I mean, obviously, in terms of sort of technical cooperation and so forth, that U.S. and Japan had things going back and forth for a long time. But if we're talking about sort of more like when do they start paying attention to it at a high level, you really start seeing that more around 2010. And it begins really with sort of, actually on the economic side, so you have the U.S.-Japan Policy Cooperative Dialogue on the Internet Economy. I wrote that down to make sure I got the name right. Which was really, that was bringing together, people from state, the FCC and Commerce and DHS on the US side, and MIC, MOPA, and many on the Japan side, and talking not just about cybersecurity, talking more about sort of the digital economy more broadly and how the US and Japan could cooperate on that, but obviously, right, network security was a big part of that. And those efforts, and I should say had industry representatives as well, don't want to leave them out, they're very important. These efforts have continued, so in 2019, you get the U.S.-Japan Strategic Digital Economy Partnership, which is building on this, and then in 2021, you have the U.S.-Japan Strategic Digital Connectivity Partnership. We're getting a lot of digital strategic partnerships here. This pattern has been continuing on, and with this sort of more economic focus. At the same time, you do start getting more of a sort of security whole of government focus as well. So in 2010, Japan participates in Cyberstorm, which is an exercise put on by the US, but involves many different countries, and so Japan joins that. And then in 2011, in the 2+2 talks, actually a lot of things seem to come out of 2+2 talks, so if you look at people working government here, they decide that they are going to actually launch a strategic dialogue on these issues, and so in 2013, they start the Japan-US cyber dialogue through an extra strategic there. And that is more of a whole of government effort. But also in 2013, in another 2+2 meeting, they decide they want more connectivity between MOD and DOD, the Ministry of Defense and the Department of Defense, and so they set up the Cyber Defense Policy Working Group for them to interact in terms of those issues. In 2015, they revised the guidelines for the U.S.-Japan defense cooperation to include cybersecurity, so that's a big important step. And then in 2019, another 2+2 meeting, it's really a theme here, the US actually recognizes in a statement after this, in the joint statement, that a cyber attack against Japan could actually trigger Article 5 of the US-Japan treaty. So this is very, very important in terms of really bringing the two countries together on that sort of military level. And so we really have actually a pretty good high-level dialogue at this point. And so what we're hoping to do with this project, and I know we're going to get more to this in the second panel, so I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, is to really sort of build out beyond these sort of high-level meetings to sort of more, how do we work together every day between the two stuff, right?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bartlett. And indeed, this panel we are here to raise the questions, and so stay for the answers in the second panel. So I wanted to just touch on the historical context, right? So the alliance U.S.-Japan since the 1950s, and that alliance has seen two superpowers really rise up through the ranks and really build a prosperous economy that has become increasingly bilateral in many ways. And the role of multinationals and technology companies since the dawn of the internet, which seems a very long time ago now, has been one of the key aspects of how a lot of this has been catalyzed. So I would love to invite Noguchi-san to share with us, given his background and his experience and his role today at Hitachi, in terms of the role of a large multinational like Hitachi and a technology one at that, and the responsibility that they have in advancing this kind of relationship in area of study and expertise.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Historically, including Hitachi, the Japanese companies are very strong for the manufacturing, very specific technology and hard things, import, export in particular, and automotives and so on. Those are a good example. And very small neat things are there. The engineers are really skilled, pretty much like a tote seido, that kind. So the teachers, student in the workplace, and everything is to do with the good quality, cheap, and they're refining things, adapting from US, and try and error things happening in the US. On the other hand, US started to have the Silicon Valley, and then internet came. As a matter of fact, everybody is using, but that is coming from DoD, which is a different expectation for normal users. But right now, what's happening is that not only import-export for the harder things, but there are a lot of digital things in it. And global supply chain are not necessarily harder things, but there are some people in it, digital things in it, the whole supply chain. If anything vulnerable there in the whole supply chain, it cannot supply to the customers. So that's a critical part of a big change. Not only the quality and the cost, but the trustability or reliability, resilience, those are really the new things coming. Particularly digital trust are coming for the future. And how to make those not only just the inside of the whole group, but relying on the software. Where that software is coming, can you validate? And small parts, maybe somewhere in the world, you never know sometimes. But how to make sure that product and somebody in the loop are trustable. So those things are coming up right now. And then ultimately responsible, the corporations, international corporations needed to secure, but even there are some other companies attacked, but needed to survive somehow to protect for the customers, because it is responsible as the supplier relying on the life every day. So those are a very big change from just product-based hard things.
Right, so in other words, it's that last piece is really profound, whereas the simple exchange of goods and services that companies would have to end consumers and buyers, business or consumer or otherwise, now businesses have become stewards for data and privacy in this new world order. Right, so thank you very much for that. Noguchi-san, Tanaka-san, would you have some comments on that, please?
Thank you. I'm not a business person, so it's very difficult to say about the business, but I was not surprised, very interesting. We are talking about 1951 or 52 or something. I was born in 1952. It's a long history. So anyway, I'm talking about the international norms or order for the historical saying. So that we have the idea of RMA, Revolution in Military Affairs, which means that emergence like gunpowder, aircraft, and sometimes tank from the nuclear power or something. So those RMA, revolution in military affairs, brought about the military reform, but also brought about social reform at the same time. So information RMA is a current issue. Information RMA is one of them. If we have adequate cyber infrastructure, the transfer of information data is infinite in the meaning of the transfer speed and also an amount of information data. So, and those data is easily processed, changed, modified. So that's the problem in this, not problem, it's a character of the information RMA. So, however, the problem is that because the internet is based on the good or honest-minded regime, so those malicious intentions have come to abuse the system by taking advantage of their goodwill. So we have some disadvantage. But competitor will has their advantage to use our disadvantage to rely on this current order. So the security environment, politics, economy, culture, and the social activities, including cognitive domain, were all affected by such malicious activities. I think we must avoid the chaos situation that occurs because the improvement of norms, orders, systems, and ethics cannot catch up with such evolution of information RMA. So, President Obama visited the atomic bomb dome area in Hiroshima in May 2016, and he said, "Science allows us to communicate across the seas and fly above the clouds, to cure disease and understand the cosmos. But those same discoveries can be turned into ever more efficient killing machines. The wars of the modern age teach this trust. Hiroshima teaches this trust. Technological progress without an equivalent progress in human institutions can doom us. The scientific revolution that led to the splitting of an atom requires a moral revolution as well." His speech. So I had a very big impression of this speech. So we have to do something, create new norms or order in the cyberspace. If not, that the cyber weapons will cause the big tragedy. Thank you.
Indeed. I think one of the most common adjectives we've been hearing in the space are words like malicious. Another one is surprise. And one of the biggest surprises for some, although expected and anticipated by many, was the Russian invasion of Ukraine across whichever ocean is your favorite on the other side of the world. But albeit on the other side of the world, the impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the cyber warfare that was a direct undercurrent of that, I think has many people concerned as it relates to the U.S. Japan collaboration on security, whether that be cybersecurity, physical security, infrastructure security. So on that topic, actually, I would love to ask our panelists to illuminate a little bit of their perspective on the things that we learned through that invasion and how it informs the way that we need to think about the collaboration in cybersecurity across the country. So if I would like to hand this over to actually everybody, I'm sure has some comment on this. So Dr. Bartlett, do you mind going first?
Oh, you're putting me first? All
Yes.
right, oh geez. I'm sure I'm the right first person, but I'll give it a shot. So I mean, at least from what I've seen looking at, I mean, there's no surprise, right, that Russia use cyber capabilities in this warfare. We would have completely expected that. The couple of things I think that were, to some degree, perhaps, I don't know if surprising is the right word, but interesting to me. One was the role of the private sector, right? I mean, we really saw, for example, Microsoft stepping up and helping in Ukraine's defense, and really gave, I hadn't, you always hear, oh sure, right, private companies are really important when it comes to cybersecurity. But boy, was that an example of that, right? Where it wasn't just that it was sort of they're important to national defense in some sort of general, broad sense. They really stepped up and took an active role in building Ukraine's defense, right? And so that was really interesting and important. And I think the other sort of lesson, which again I think we've all sort of seen and learned from this, is that, but it's easily forgotten, is that cyber defense is not only about defense, it's about resiliency and being able to come back from being sort of hit with a cyber attack. And we've seen that in Ukraine over and over again, right, where they're getting hit with these things, and they can't stop everything from coming in, but they can be good at recovering quickly after the attack happens, and that's made a huge difference. Right? It's made it much less effective to use cyber attacks against them. So to me, those are like the two kind of big, interesting lessons that have come out from it. But I'm sure the other panelists have even more interesting lessons.
Tamara, you have some comments?
Thank you. I think, as you mentioned, the use of cyber attacks in the recent Russian invasion of Ukraine wasn't a surprise, in part because they were also utilized in 2014 when Russia invaded Crimea, right? So this is a pattern of action that we've seen. However, the scale of both just the ground invasion, but also the cyber attacks this time around, was far larger. And I think, like many surprises of this nature, they serve as galvanizing moments, right? They're a galvanizing moment among a whole host of other relationships, but for our partnership between the U.S. and Japan in the space of cybersecurity in particular. It showed the form and nature and intensity that cyber attacks can take in hybrid warfare, which is what we're seeing more and more often in conflicts across the world. And it's also the reason why, I mentioned this May meeting between our leaders, it's why there's this importance of reaffirming the rules-based international order today, right? It's yet another example of ways in which the actions of nefarious actors could undermine that rules-based international order, and the reasons why we have to redouble our efforts to both safeguard against attacks that we now know are likely coming, right? That's the one unfortunate, almost, I wouldn't say advantage in a case like this, but it's the one unfortunate response or result of this kind of attack is now you know what's coming. You know what you have to prepare for. And it can come in many different forms from many different actors, but this has redoubled our efforts and galvanized our response.
Thank you. Noguchi-san?
Yes. Yeah, thank you for the question. The surprise is that how we didn't know what's going to happen. While 2014, there are some already spillover impact to the U.S. and industry, some people knew, but mostly the government people knew what's going to happen. And last year, people started to talk about, and eventually 3 days before, people predicted, it's going to happen. But the people in Japan didn't even talk about it. And those gaps are really the big surprise to me. We didn't know. And then eventually, after the fact that the government started to share the information with the industry, so that's a good thing. But how to protect, that is another big challenge going forward. But the real big surprise was that how little industry knew what's going to happen. But in Ukraine, actually, industry knew. They exercised quite a lot for the industry perspective and the government. But they couldn't resist because of the fact that it's a hybrid war situation. And in Japan, still safe, secure, but could happen anytime. How can we really prepare That's my personal concern.
Thank you very much, and Tanaka-san.
So, I have no idea about the answer. So, anyway, we have to prepare for the new era. As I told you that the information RMA is already reaching to the new stage. We are using that more cognitive measures, influencing measures, that metaverse or other virtualizing measures. So such kind of thing that we create a new world, or maybe that we are always thinking about the physical domain because that routine life is just a physical domain using a cyber domain or internet and many devices. But in our future, they are merging together in same domain, maybe the same domain, we can say that. The simple example is the metaverse. We cannot find any solution for the future warfare or other fighting in the many fields. Anyway, so we have to prepare for this kind of new values. So I'm trying to find out this new value. Even for the competitors should share the common value, because we have to coexist in our future. So sometimes we will fight or we will compete, but we will coexist in economy or other cultural. So we create a new value for using our cyberspace. So I'm not sure that it is.
No, I'm just inspired that a retired Major General is talking about coexisting with your competition or the enemy. That's beautiful. Thank you very much for that inspiration. So I would love for all of you actually to consider this question while we ask the answers from our panelists. So imagine if you had $10 million US to invest in policy or governance in the cybersecurity realm. And that's in yen, 1.5 billion yen, I think, yes. So, well, depending on the exchange rate today. So I would love to ask the panelists if you can share with us, if you had that kind of money as a venture capitalist or as a policymaker, so on and so forth, where would you invest it and why? And Noguchi-san, I will start with you.
10 million US dollars. Going perhaps that for the policy perspective, think tank or do tank internationally to create that can guide where is the necessary development, including workforce, including new technology for the future. For instance, metaverse, Tanaka-san mentioned, and the digital twins, and 5G, 6G, AI, those new technology can be also the part of the development jointly. So think tank in Japan is weaker than US, but starting with a joint project and getting to a kind of think tank and then do together, and then Japan can get a good think tank in this area. Good news is that starting to think to the extent which that economic security need a think tank and so on, but for real need for the U.S. Japan perspectives, how internationally to collaborate with think tank. That could be a good investment in my perspective.
So different kind of tank, not the military tank. But it's
No,
good.
no, no.
Yeah. Benjamin? Benjamin?
Well, Noguchi-san did a much better job of sticking with the theme of the panel. I like that, the U.S. Japan cooperation. I thought more on the lines of sort of, to me, thinking about where we still have an enormous problem and I don't know how to solve it, is still on sort of this internal risk problem, right? Where it doesn't matter how many great ways you have of, securing your 0 days, if someone's gonna click on, a link in an email and give access into your networks. And so to me, like, that's where the money should go, all right? Or if I were investing it in something, right? Was figuring out how do we better deal with those internal risks, right? Is this training? Do we need to focus on better ways of authenticating, users? Do we need to, is there some sort of technological solution using AI? I'm not in that world anymore, right? I don't deal with the tech side, but it seems to me like that's really one of the problems that if we don't figure out how to solve that, we're not going to solve the cybersecurity problem. So to me, that's where I would focus it.
Okay. Tanaka-san?
Oh. Again, I'm not a business person though. I'm imagining that $10 million. Oh. But I'm at this stage or the future stage that we will be lack of the finding the truth or trust or fact among their chaotic circumstances. So metaverse and other cyber measures using for that convenience, but also for using the influence against the cognitive domain, human cognitive. So we need to find what is fact or what is true, and how we have that trustworthy communication relationship among the people or country. So we have to use this 10 million to develop this fact, not fact check, but using the AI, artificial intelligence or other technology to create this, find out the fact is right, something like that.
Thank you. So Tamara disclosed to me before we came into the panel, she said, I don't know if I have an answer on your $10 million question. And I realized that's how good of a policymaker she is. She's trying to get me to get up on the number. So if I get it to 100 million?
This has changed everything. I'll take 100 million.
Okay.
So now I do have answers. With the 100 million, 10 million, there's not much I can do, I'll be honest. Just, like any ex-government employee, you need more funding. It's funny, over the past 2 days, we've had the privilege of going to a number of meetings with private sector officials, government officials, and others to kind of talk about this shared challenge of cybersecurity. And one of the issues that's come up is the extent to which the private sector also needs support, and it's small businesses in particular that need support. So with 100 million, I would say maybe as a starter fund, just proof of concept, we might need more. But with that 100 million, I think I would want to address this kind of ongoing problem of businesses using vulnerable legacy infrastructure, which is that much more prone to cyber attacks of all kinds, from phishing to others. And so invest that money in small to medium-sized businesses for their modernization efforts. Because one of the things that we've heard and that we all know as well is that larger companies often have the resources and means to do these kinds of activities, to protect themselves, to protect their employees, to protect their systems. This is much tougher for small and medium-sized businesses. And so investing in this, I think, would help protect the population.
A true story, by the way, that was totally improvised. She did not have an answer on the 10 million, and I realized what she was doing. So. Okay, so I know you are all eager to hear the answers that the next panel has, but before I hand the mic over to my colleague, Joe, I do want to just do a rapid fire, if you don't mind. So 2030 used to be this future year, right? I don't even remember when Blade Runner was set, but 2030 is now a year that a lot of companies and organizations are looking at for climate, some goals set there. But all of a sudden, 2030 is 1 dog year away. So any of you who have dogs, you know, a dog year is 7 years, so it's not that far away anymore. So I would like to challenge our panelists with a rapid fire answer on 2040. Let's fast forward 17 years from now. And I think Tamara's now thinking her kids are going to be off to college around that time. But I would love just a quick answer on what does the U.S. Japan cybersecurity ecosystem look like? No pressure to put it in a short phrase, but Dr. Bartlett, I'm going to have you go first.
All right. Well, I mean, you never make predictions if you're a social scientist, they say, but I'm going to pretend not for 2 seconds. I mean, I actually think by 2040, I'm optimistic about the U.S.-Japan cyber relationship. I think it will be much more robust by 2040. I think you will get the kinds of cooperation across different levels of government and within industry that we want to see. Because there are so many people, including the people here, who are interested in and really working on this, A, and B, because the U.S.-Japan relationship is just so fundamentally important to both countries. So I'm actually very optimistic about that. What I would like to see, and we've sort of talked about this, is once we get to that point, then how can the U.S.-Japan then expand that cooperation to other countries beyond just the U.S.-Japan? That's going to be the next important step, is cooperating with, you know, the other, you know, potential partners we have out there in the world.
Thank you. Noguchi-san.
Yes. 2040 could be the time that many things are automated and the metaverse is coming more applied. So even we cannot drive by ourselves, even though we like to. On the other hand, it's more vulnerable. How can we make sure that all the society, smarter society, is stable and safe, secure, and robust? And there are a lot of other challenges coming up in the future as well. But thinking about security as a design, for instance, innovative way for everyday life, constantly U.S. Japan can have the opportunity to have innovation constantly. That can also, going forward, for economic value, not only just for security purpose. So those are, I can imagine.
Thank you very much. And then Tanaka-san, aside from us coexisting with our competitors.
2040. Oh, now I'm at 70. Koki in Japanese, Koki celebration. The 2040, then Beijing, Beijing age celebration. Anyway, so I wonder if that we can imagine that artificial intelligence on the malicious side and artificial intelligence on the honest side, honest-minded side, are fighting with robotics and microtechnology. It's in the, I guess that it's in 2040. So emotionally, they're, Benjamin said that optimistic for me. But alliance using those technology will meet some difficulties because of caused by differences or gaps between US and Japan. And also, we have more difficult ethical issue between us and competitors. So we need to prepare for the new war or conflict or fighting. I can say good words about it.
Okay. Thank you, Tamara.
Sure, thank you. I'll end on an optimistic note. I think in 2040 I see greater cooperation, but for me that means enhanced interoperability, both in terms of private sector and industry, but also in the defense sector between SDFs, cyber team, and DoD forces. So I think interoperability is an ingredient, especially for the challenges and threats that we might face, as my panelists mentioned.
Well, thank you very much, Tanaka-san, Noguchi-san, Dr. Bartlett, Tamara. It was a pleasure to be here with you today. Again, we will have the opportunity to ask some questions after the second panel. So now I would like to invite my panelists to step down, and it is my distinct pleasure and privilege to invite Professor Joe Kelly to the stage, and I'll have him introduce his panelists.